December 16th, 1811. 2 in the morning. Imagine you are a merchant in a small river town along the Mississippi. You fall asleep counting the profits from your latest shipment of cotton and flour. You wake up because your bed is sprinting across the room. Outside, the earth isn't just shaking, it is liquefying. The ground bursts open, vomiting black shale and sulfur steam. The mighty Mississippi River, the literal artery of American commerce, stops, shudders, and then begins to flow backward. In the darkness, the sounds of snapping timber and crashing stone aren't just the sounds of a disaster. They are the sounds of every investment, every debt, and every dream of a Western empire being swallowed by the mud. By dawn, the map of American wealth hasn't just changed. It has been erased. To understand how a series of earthquakes in the middle of a wilderness could cripple a nation's economy, we have to look at what America was in 1810. It wasn't the industrial powerhouse we know today. It was a giant, fragile startup. The country was essentially a collection of farms and ports held together by a single, watery thread, the Mississippi River system. If you were a banker in Philadelphia or a merchant in London, your eyes were on the West. This was the era of the great land boom. Thousands of settlers were pouring into the frontier, buying acres on credit, betting their lives that they could grow crops and ship them downriver to New Orleans. Money back then wasn't digital digits on a screen. It was physical. It was gold, silver, and most importantly, private bank notes. In the early 1800s, the United States didn't have a single national currency. Local banks issued their own paper money based on the gold they supposedly had in their vaults. But the real value backing that paper wasn't just gold. It was the land. It was the promise of future harvests. It was the belief that the dirt beneath your feet was a stable, appreciating asset. Then, the New Madrid earthquakes hit. This wasn't one event. It was a sequence of shocks so powerful they were felt from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. Church bells rang in Boston from the vibrations. In the epicenter, near what is now Missouri, the very geography of the economy vanished. Entire islands in the river, used as navigation markers for trade, simply disappeared. Massive lakes formed where forests once stood. For the investors back east, the news traveled slowly, but the impact was instantaneous. Imagine you are a lender who has just financed a massive shipment of goods headed to New Orleans. Suddenly, the river is impassable. The boats are smashed. The crews are gone. But the debt? The debt is still there. The disaster created a terrifying financial ripple effect. When the land literally sank, the collateral for thousands of loans vanished. You can't foreclose on a farm that is now at the bottom of a newly formed lake. This led to a massive contraction of credit. Banks, terrified that their frontier investments were literally underwater, stopped lending. They began demanding that people pay back their loans in specie, which is just a fancy word for gold and silver coins. But the settlers didn't have gold. They had land. Land that was now cracked, flooded, and terrifying. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you are watching this from. It genuinely surprises us every time how far these stories travel. As the ground finally stopped shaking in 1812, a new kind of disaster began, the first real federal disaster relief battle in American history. It was called the New Madrid Relief Act of 1815. This was supposed to be a lifeline. The government told settlers that if their land had been destroyed by the quakes, they could exchange their ruined plots for new certificates to claim land elsewhere in the public domain. It sounds noble, doesn't it? But where there is a vacuum of information and a desperate population, the predators move in. Wealthy land speculators in cities like St. Louis and Nashville realized something the poor farmers didn't. They realized that the New Madrid certificates were essentially a new form of currency. These speculators rode out into the devastated zones on horseback. They found traumatized families living in tents, surrounded by ruined crops and swallowed fields. They offered these families pennies on the dollar for their land claims. To a starving farmer, $40 in silver felt like a fortune. The speculators then took those certificates back to the land offices and used them to claim the most valuable, prime real estate in the territory. It was one of the greatest wealth transfers in early American history. A natural disaster had broken the small farmer, and the financial system was used to harvest what was left of their dignity. This era, between 1810 and the mid-century, was a chess match played with human lives. The New Madrid disaster didn't just break the local economy, it taught the American financial elite a dark lesson. Volatility is a commodity. While the quakes caused a temporary stagnation in trade, the resulting land grab laid the foundations for massive dynasties. The story of 1811 is often told as a footnote of geology, but its true legacy is written in the ledgers of the 19th century. It reveals a chilling truth about the world we've built. We like to think of our financial systems as solid, grounded in logic and mathematics. But those systems are built on top of a world that is fundamentally unpredictable. The people of New Madrid believed they were building a permanent empire of commerce. They trusted the river. They trusted the soil. They never imagined that the very earth could default on them. When the collapse happened, it wasn't just the chimneys that fell, it was the illusion of control. The architects of the early American economy built something remarkable, a system of credit and expansion that turned a wilderness into a global power. But they also built a system that had no safety net for the small player when nature turned violent. They created a world where disaster for the many became a windfall for the few who had the capital to wait up the tremors. Today, our markets are moved by algorithms and high-frequency trades, but the core vulnerability remains the same. We are still betting on the stability of things we cannot truly command. The New Madrid quakes remind us that wealth is a ghost that can be conjured by a signature on a piece of paper, and it can be exorcised by a shift in the tectonic plates. We live in the cracks left behind by these giants. If you want to understand how the hidden forces of money and power continue to shape our modern world, you have to look at the moments when the ground actually gave way. If you found this look into the dark side of history's ledgers fascinating, make sure to hit that like button. It helps us keep digging into these untold stories. Subscribe to join us as we uncover more of the financial battles that built and broke the world. Until next time, keep a close eye on your assets and an even closer eye on the horizon.